Hi everyone, and welcome to Pod of the Damned. I'm your host Ian, and joining me for today's episode is my co-host Candy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. Thank you for joining me. We're doing something a little different today. Something that was unplanned by us. So once again, our schedule. Like we make this work the best we can, guys. We promise. But sometimes, our schedules, they just don't quite match up. But we're here. We're here for another episode. So today we're going to be doing a top five episode. So if those of you who have been following this podcast for a really long time, or if you've gone back and checked out some of our back catalogue, will know that way back in the early days of the show, me and Nico did a top. I think it was a top 10 episode we actually did back then. But we're just going to do a top five. I think top 10 is like stretching it a little bit
And
sometimes.
if you're unfamiliar with my history, I have a very hard time narrowing down a top five. So I flew by the seat of my pants, and there's some wild shit on there.
Oh, this is going to be great. So for those who are aware, today we're doing top five horror remakes slash reboots. We'll throw reboots in there as well. We're going to be talking about those because everybody loves a horror remake. No one ever complains about horror remakes.
Well, some people do.
Some people do.
Some people are absolutely against them.
Hmm. But I mean, I think both of us as well. Like, because we're very much in the give remakes a chance camp.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and
I will absolutely do that.
I'm sure over the course of this episode we'll talk about a few absolute stinkers. But I think hopefully between I say 10 movies, but like we said before we came on air, there's probably going to be some crossovers. But between the 10 picks, I'm sure we're hopefully going to prove why people should always give horror remakes a chance. Before we do that, I'll quickly run through some housekeeping. If you'd like to support us across our social media platforms, you can do so. We're on X/Twitter at Damn Podcast. We're on Facebook and Instagram, Pod of the Damned. You can email us at podofthedamned@gmail.com. You can subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Pod of the Damned. Nice and easy. Candy, where can people find you?
Um, I'm at Candy the Final Girl on Instagram. I do cross post a lot of our stuff from Pot of the Damned, and I can be found on X at Candy Final Girl, also cross posting, and you will see me on Pot of the Damned's X as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
And
Um,
all of my links to everything are at Linktree/Candy the Final Girl.
Awesome. So go follow the pair of us across there. I would shout out Nico's social medias, but it's literally pointless because he
It doesn't really.
he doesn't really do social media. He is very much a technophobe, but we love him all the same. Before we go into the discussion, because obviously we've a slightly different episode and we're slightly more chilled out vibes. Candy, have you seen anything new or revisited anything this week horror related?
Um, I rewatched The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Nice.
So that was quite a film, and it was my daughter's first time watching it, and we all kind of were like, and I don't think Sean had seen it, and we had this really great discussion afterward about it. So I was kind of digging through some old A24.
Nice, nice. Listen, it's always worth going through some A24. Although I think, given one of the discussions, a movie that's coming out later this year, we're going to have a very interesting discussion about a
Yes,
certain franchise that is not as popular in my household as it is in a lot of other households. So I think that's going to be an interesting discussion. I'll leave people for now to make up their minds about that.
yeah.
Well, I went to the cinemas this week, as you already know, but the listeners don't. I went to go see The Strangers Chapter One. I will be recording a little mini-sode of that at some point, so that'll be dropping soon. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but man, I fucking hate that movie. It is so, so bad. Basically, if I could sum it up, right, it is basically the original Strangers movie, but worse. Like, it is, like, for this, like, they've got this, like, reimagining trilogy that they've got coming out of this sort of story in the franchise. The chapter one is literally just a carbon copy almost of the first one, and I mean they've changed like a couple of things. Like the setup is slightly different. Aside from that, like some of the shots are exactly the same. It's just nowhere near as good. And
That
listen,
sounds kind of lazy. I hate when they do that.
Yeah, and it's the fact that they're making a trilogy out of it as well, and I don't really know what
Everything's a trilogy now,
everything's a
and I'm like,
trilogy. Everyone's
calm
joined the
down.
that's David Gordon Green's fault, and I know he's your favorite.
You know how I feel about him. He has a very punchable face, and I'm upset with him.
Well, when we eventually do our episode on The Exorcist, I'm sure we can have a little discussion about David
Oh,
Gordon
I have
Green.
some choice words.
Anyways,
Very
right.
choice.
Let's get into this list now. Let's not keep our listeners waiting for much longer. So we're talking about the top 5 horror remakes slash reboots, whatever you want to call them. I've left a couple of things off my list, um, just because technically they're canon. They're not remakes and reboots. And there's one movie. I'm gonna just throw this out there. I'll let you say your first reveal first, or your number 5 pick. But I just want to get this out of the way. I've not included Evil Dead in my list. But if I was including it in my list, it would probably be in second place.
I left it off my list as well, but I have a very, very deep love for it. As a fan of the original trilogy, my child is named Ash. So, I have a deep love for it, and I really enjoyed the sort of reboot that Fede Alvarez did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Evil Dead Rise is all right, but yeah.
I'm one of those sort of weird people who prefer Evil Dead and Evil Dead Rise to the original trilogy. Don't shoot me. It, but
I
Evil
have deep, deep shame for you. I'm
Evil
very disappointed in you.
Evil Dead much more than Evil Dead Rise. I still really liked Evil Dead Rise. I've got a lot of love for that movie.
It was good, but I thought Evil Dead, the Fed Alvarez 2013 version was superior to
Yeah,
Evil Dead.
and they are very different. Obviously, they're very different. Sort of vibes from the originals. That they've and that's where you take some like a classic IP like Evil Dead, and you really do put your own twist on it. Yes, you know what? It had so many callbacks and throwbacks in there to those original trilogy, but they did everything like Fede Alvarez did things the way he wanted to do them, and that's why a lot. And that film is metal as fuck.
I
When
felt like if you're gonna do reboot, do that fucking reboot. It
yeah,
was fantastic.
if you tried to do an Evil Dead reboot and tried to copy the sort of vibes and how they captured, the comedy and all that from that original, you're just going to fall flat on your face. You're going to fail so hard, So they did it right, but because technically it is canon, it's not technically a remake. I've left it. That's why I've left it off my list. But I absolutely love that movie. My Evil Dead. So this to upset you. It's Evil Dead 2013. It's Evil Dead 2. It's uh, it's Evil Dead Rise. It's Evil Dead, and then it's Army of Darkness. However, I would just like to say that none of them are bad movies. They're all like it's we've talked.
No, there's not a bad movie in that series
I
at
think
all.
we've only covered Army of Darkness previously on the podcast. And me and Nico, we discussed it. We said in that show, listen, this is probably the only franchise where there is not one bad movie in there. Pound for pound, I think Evil Dead is the greatest horror franchise simply because there is now 5 movies in that franchise. And, even if you think one is not as good as the others, I think Army of Darkness is the weakest of the 3. But,
I
that's.
agree with that, and most people get mad
Yeah.
because my son, my husband, that is their favorite, and I'm like, oh man, no, Evil Dead 2 all the way. But that's a whole separate discussion.
Yeah.
I'm Evil Dead.
Yeah.
It runs very deep with me.
Yeah. I think just prepare the listeners because I think we're going to be doing Evil Dead at some point, the 2013 version, relatively soon. Prepare yourselves. I feel like that's probably going to be a very long episode. I feel like we've
And it's
all.
gonna be great.
It's
It's gonna
great
be really
because
great.
Nico loves that franchise as well, and I think there's going to be a lot of love. But we've got so much to talk about with it when it comes to Evil Dead movies, and we had an absolute blast when we did the Army of Darkness. However, that was just the one, and I will do some other honorable mentions for things that are not on the list when we get to the end of our list as well. So again, Candy, if you've got anything that you've left off that you want to still talk about, then we can do that at the end of the list. But what I'll do is I'll let you crack on and reveal to myself, because we don't know our lists either. We don't know each other's lists, although I can hazard a guess of a few things that might be on your list. I'm sure you could probably think of a couple of things that will be on my one. Let us know your number 5 pick and why you chose it.
Well, I want to preface by saying I have a very hard time rating things especially in an order, because there's usually like number one, there's like 10 movies. I can't decide. But so I really tried to narrow this down. And I had hurt my back yesterday. So I kind of took a heavy pain medicine today. So this list is gonna be kind of wacky, but
We did also like come up with this app. We were doing this episode at very short notice.
right.
But yeah, sorry.
Okay, for number five, I settled on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 remake. I am a huge fan of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, but I especially love the original version of it. And when the 2003 version came out, one with my crush Jessica Biel in it, who is insanely hot in it. Um, I thought it was like done so well. Like it was reverent and it kind of went that extra mile that people wanted to see in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was gritty. It started off this kind of gritty reboot in the early 2000s, but this was done so fucking well. It's still like one of my top, I rewatch it all the time. And I don't know, I just thought that it was gory, it was dirty, it was grimy as it should be. Um, and that was, definitely referencing the original film, but this kind of kicked it up a notch. That notch that I think a lot of us wanted, especially if you're a repeat viewer of the first film. This movie just kind of like shows the things, and it was just done fantastically.
Yeah, you know what? Like, I've made no secret about it. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre just like isn't my favorite franchise in the world. Like, I appreciate the original. I appreciate everything that it did for horror, and the original is a great movie. I was really harsh on the original when we did cover it on the show, and then I think when we did our 100th episode and we did like a few we re-ranked a few things. I wound my neck in a little bit and I gave it some extra points that I think it actually deserves. I saw like so obviously like we decided we were coming up with this, episode topic a few hours ago. So I spent like an hour or so just sort of scrolling through, just in case, there's things that had slipped my mind. And I seen TCM03 come up quite a few times, and I was like, you know what, I think I could put that in. And it was definitely one. It's in my honorable mentions. It's not in my top five, but it's definitely one that I can fuck with that movie, like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
for lack of a better term. I'm just shocked, Candy, that you didn't put the recent Netflix TCM
um
movie.
hmm. That movie was just an abomination. It was an absolute fucking shit show. And not in a fun way. I think if you're gonna be bad at something, you should at least make it entertaining. And I was very disappointed, especially like because the 2003 version was done so fucking well, to the point of I consider it like the early 2000s Scream. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Because when Scream happened, um, my senior year in high school, it changed horror for like a decade.
Yeah.
Kind of everything was hinged on that, like how well it was done. And I think TCM 03 kind of did that in the early 2000s. We had the new French extremity movement. I mean, it was a great time in horror for like pushing the envelope. And so this was done just masterfully. And then everybody, including that remake of The Hills Have Eyes, which I don't fuck with. I mean, a lot of people love it. And I'm like, please go back and watch it because you probably haven't seen it in a while. And when you rewatch it, you'll go, man, this is dog shit. It's really not as good as I remember. But TCM 03 completely holds up.
I think
Absolutely.
I think I was on your old show for the Hills Have Eyes remake, and
Yeah, we were all like, wow, wow,
it
wow.
was one of those things. I think this is what I said when we did that, and I was like, you know what? It's one of those films that yes, you're right. When you think about it and you go back and you visit it, and you're like, this is not a good movie. But for some reason, every time I do think about it, I still think about it. is a decent film, if that makes sense. You know, I always sit there and I'll think to
It's
myself
all
like,
right.
"Oh, The Hills Have Eyes, yeah, that's a good film," and then I'll go back and watch it, and again I'll be like, "Actually, it's not okay." And I even did it here. Like, I wasn't ever going to put it in my top five, but I was like, "Oh, I could put it in my honorable mentions." And I was like, "No, actually, you know what? Like, remind myself that doesn't go, it doesn't go there." But it's interesting. I like what you say about the sort of the scream of its sort of like time as well, because like you say, Scream did change the game, and that came out at a time where horror really wasn't doing particularly well, and it
Yeah,
was
the 90s were a dry spell,
I
honestly.
think you could probably count 10 movies from the 90s and you'd be like, right, they're the good ones, and there's not much else. You can probably go like Scream and Candyman and Misery, and then you're Silence of the Lambs, and then you're struggling.
Right, right.
And yeah, like
Event Horizon was a wild card in there, though.
yeah. Oh yeah, like of course, yeah. But like you say, you got this sort of early notice. You're coming to the end of that sort of era, and like you say, we're really pushing the envelope out now with things like the French Extremity movies, and with this movie as well. And it signaled that shift to a new direction of horror. And I think it's always important that we sort of recognize that as well. So
Absolutely. And so that's why it made the list for me. That's why it was number five. I'm like, I gotta do this one because I respect it. I love it. It changed horror at the
mhm.
time, and it's just so well done. I love the gore. I love the reverence of the subject matter, and that it was just really fucking well done. And I do rewatch it. I have that edition. I probably should have brought it out here where you unfold it and it's the chainsaw.
Nice.
I fucking love it. I had another version of it, but I had to have that one too. Um, you know, I'm one of those people that has like three or four copies of certain movies. So
Yeah. Okay, right. So TCM is your number five pick. So I will take over now and do my number five pick. And this is probably one of the ones that I went a little left field with, and maybe people might not expect this to be on my list. But the reason I've picked this movie is because the original is just something like, as horror fans, like we obviously know about it, but it's really something that isn't factored in by a lot of people, and it's the Crazies from 2010. So
mad props. And that I'm a huge Romero fan,
mhm.
but the Romero version just drags
Yeah.
on.
And I think it is one of those things, sometimes we talked about right at the start there about, where give remakes a chance kind of people. And like you said, there are people out there who are just like, fuck remakes. I don't
I
want to
have one in
watch them.
particular that people get really pissed off that we'll get to.
But there is a sort of portion of people who have this sort of opinion that remakes should be taking properties that are maybe like unsuccessful but have like really good premises and remaking those rather than necessarily remaking something that's considered a classic and then doing a really shit job of it. And to an extent, I kind of agree with that. However, I think once a certain time period has passed, I think there's an acceptable level of remaking classics as well to try and bring, IPs into newer audiences and things
Yes,
like
it's
that.
much like walking a tightrope. You
Yeah,
know
of
what I mean?
course. But, like you said, the crazies, listen, you are probably one of the biggest Romero fans on the planet.
I feel like I am the biggest Romero fan, honestly.
And but I think this the 2010 version of the Crazies, I think it was really well done. Listen, I think it's the greatest movie in the world? Absolutely not. But you know what? It's a tense movie. It's just like a nice little horror film. It's lovely. It's got a good cast. You've got Radha Mitchell and Timothy Olyphant, and they both do a great job. It's really tense. There's some real proper like scary moments, and I just think it's a movie who really doesn't get the credit it actually deserves. I think it was a really good movie. I think it probably got kind of lost in the shuffle because it's coming out at a time where horror's really starting to hit its stride in the past sort of, because it came out in 2010, and if you look at the next sort of few years after that, this is where horror's really been sort of starting to take off, in this last sort of 10 to 15 year golden period that I like to call it. It's been going through. So I think it's gotten lost a little bit in the shuffle. I just don't think it gets the credit it deserves.
I agree with you, honestly. And that's coming from a massive Romero fan. That is one of my least favorite Romero films. And so it was ripe for a remake.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I really enjoyed it. It took the concept and cut out some of that drag that's in it and just really went there. I agree with you. It's really well done. And I think that it doesn't get its flowers, you know?
Yeah, 100%. So that's why that's in at number five. Listen, it's definitely, it's like I say, it's not the greatest movie in the world. It's a perfectly good horror movie. I think it's actually, we talk about like good entry level horror movies for people. I think this is a good like second step for people who, have gotten into the world of horror. Right, okay, I want to maybe take it up a notch where, some proper creepy shit is happening. And I think The Crazies is a great movie for that as well. So number five for me. Um, definitely worth a mention. So, moving on. I'm just gonna. We will probably end up firing through a couple of these, but we'll move on. So, Candy, do you want to reveal your number four pick?
My number four pick is um I'll preface this with saying I love classic films. I grew up on B movies like sci-fi and those kind of like late night replay movies, or like my local horror host here in Indianapolis was Sammy Terry, and he would show a lot of these old sci-fi horror classics. So the my number four pick is 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatchers with my man who is up there with Tom Atkins for me, Donald Sutherland. I think he's insanely hot. He's the right age for me because I like him old, and I think he's insanely more talented and hotter than his son Kiefer.
Oh
But
yes.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the '78 version, is kind of iconic, but it really doesn't ever get included in these kinds of lists. And I think it's just this taut, amazing thriller. Um, it's got a young Jeff Goldblum in it. It's got Veronica Cartwright in it, known for like Alien and stuff like that. But she was also on the original Twilight Zone
Hmm.
episodes and stuff like that. So it's just got this amazing cast, and it's well done. It's so tense and taut and paranoid. It's shot beautifully. And we have the iconic scene. Even if you haven't seen this version, you know that I'm going to illustrate it on the video here, but where, Donald Sutherland, doing that. And that scream gets to me, that this inhuman scream. And it's so beautiful. I just recently rewatched it because I've got this beautiful Blu-ray edition of it, and it holds up. It looks great. It's just fucking great every time.
You know what? This is one I really toyed with putting on my list, and this is one of the ones that I knew would be in your top five. This was like definitely like Candy's
So
definitely gonna
you
pick
know
this.
me,
So I
because
knew
most
this.
people wouldn't include that.
No, I knew 100% you were definitely gonna pick this. I've left it in my honorable mentions, but you're absolutely right. This movie is an absolute classic. It's weird because it's one of the ones I don't revisit it very often, but every time I revisit it, I just have an absolute blast with it. It's so good. Like you say, you've got that moment, that very, very gifable moment of, Donald Sutherland pointing, and it's great all round.
I use that gift constantly.
Yes. But yeah, no, I think it's a great pick. I really did toy with the idea. I think knowing that it was going to be in your list probably made me leave it off my list just so I could pick something else. Because I think this is definitely one. I think this was where I was toying between, do I go for the Crazies or do I go for Invasion of the Body Snatchers? And I was like, you know what, I'll go for the Crazies because I didn't think you were going to pick that, and I knew you were going to pick this. But definitely, if anyone out there's not seen it, definitely go check it out because.
And it's a PG film, and
Mhm.
you wouldn't think of that because it is so intensely scary without being gory, without, I mean, it's just Leonard Nimoy's in there. We've got just this like wild cast, and it just works. And it's I don't know, it's just a tight,
It
taut little thriller.
it's got one of the like sort of the most terrifying concepts really as well. Like the actual concept of the body, like the people that you talk to, the people you answer to, the people in your life may not be the people who you think they are, and there's no way of telling. Like it's a really really fascinating premise that movies have tried to replicate, and things like that. I think me and Nico did do a little discussion on Invasion of the Body Snatchers when we did our Faculty episode, because obviously it kind
Yeah,
of
you kind of have to reference it.
it's you kind of have to talk about it, but
But
yeah.
what I do like, one thing that they improved on, because I think when you do a remake, let me just get this out there, you need to be to get it right, you need to be reverent to the source material, but you also have to add something. And so we've got Leonard Nimoy as a psychiatrist
Hmm.
because this is a very paranoid film. Somebody says, "Hey, my husband's not my husband." People are thinking, okay, you're wacky or you've got marital problems or that can be misunderstood, but you're literally saying, that is not my husband. It looks and sounds like my husband, but it's not.
Hmm.
And so we've got, psychiatric science in there that was missing more from the original.
I think as well, for me, it just like scratches a lot of different itches, when it comes to what you want to get from a film. Like you say, it gives you that sort of sci-fi element in it out, but you've got that great cast in there, and there's the tension, and like you say, it's not a gory film; it's a PG film, so it's so accessible for everyone again. But it's still terrifying, and even today, that again, I go back to like the whole premise of the thing. It's a premise that holds up. You talked about how it holds up, on modern viewings, and I think part of that is because that premise is relevant in any time. This is not something. It's not a premise that's ever going to age. So I think all of those things combined. It's definitely a very worthy choice of being on your list.
Well, I'm glad you agree because I just when I hear people talk about remakes, I just feel like it gets neglected.
So let me ask you a question about remakes in general before we move on. What to you defines a good remake? Because I've seen remakes out there that I think are nowhere near as good as the original. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad movies. But does that make it a bad remake?
Um, it depends. It's very much a fine line. Um, I think, you know, you have to reference the source material. You have to make it your own.
Mm-hmm.
In whatever way that you do that. Like we mentioned Evil Dead 2013, Fede Alvarez like made that his own, but it's still Evil Dead. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's done right. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is done right. It takes the concept and is it loves it. It's reverent, but it also does its own thing, and it does it in such a way that's respectful and also impressive. It has to have something impressive
Mm-hmm.
in it to say, hey, I put my stamp on this. I'm making you rethink this, but I'm also saying I love this film.
Yeah. I think as well, just basically just don't do a remake of of Psycho, and do shot.
Especially a shot for shot. What the fucking point was that? And Vince Vaughn. I mean, that was a terrible cast. It was absolute fucking hot garbage. It stunk.
I did warn everyone we were going to bring up a few stinkers. I think
Oh
Psycho is
yeah.
Psycho is probably the one
It's
of.
universally fucking
I
hated.
think that could definitely be like one of the worst horror remakes of all time. That is
It's
just.
like they took everything that you're not supposed to do in a remake and they put it in there. It's like you're taking one of the most iconic horror films of all time with one of the most iconic villains in and Norman Bates, and you're gonna do a shot for shot remake of it. So you're not updating it. You're just throwing a kind of a shitty cast in there and saying, oh, but we're gonna shoot it exactly like Hitchcock. Well, one, you're not fucking Hitchcock. No one is. He's an asshole, but he would, his art was fucking brilliant.
He knew how to make a good horror film.
That's for damn sure.
Anyways, I think we should maybe move on from Psycho before we
Yeah,
get
because
we get
oh
ourselves
boy.
too worked up. I'm gonna jump in with my number 4 pick now. This is one that I think might feature in your list later on. I don't know. Like this, I'm not sure about this one. But for me at number 4, David Cronenberg's The Fly. It's an absolute classic of horror. It's you talked about Jeff Goldblum. You've got Jeff Goldblum in there. You've got Gina Davis, and they're absolutely killing it. This movie is so gooey and sticky and icky, and this is a disgusting movie in the best possible way. This is a movie that just it makes your skin crawl. It's so I often think about that scene from Hellraiser, you know, when Frank's like reappearing out of the floorboards and it's just all
Oh,
like
yeah.
dripping and
Mm.
gooey. That is just like a definition of The Fly. That's what this movie is. And for me, it's it's so it's just really satisfying for me. I love this movie so much.
And I think, I mean, it's not a secret. The Fly is on my list, actually. It's my number three.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Well, we'll throw these in together and have a big
yeah,
discussion about it.
we'll kind of mix this. Cronenberg is known for his body horror,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't disappoint with this. When I was a kid and saw this movie, one, not only was it horrifying and absolutely brutal and disgusting, it's fucking emotional. It's sad. So it takes the concept. I love the original, The Fly.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have this really cool box set, which I also didn't bring out with me. I have some really cool goodies. Um, it's this cool set from Shout Factory that's all the Blu-rays of the entire, like the original Return of the Fly, Curse of the Fly, all from the 60s. And then it has The Fly from Cronenberg and then The Fly 2. So it's this really great set. Um, but the thing is the movie is just absolutely heartbreakingly sad. You feel emotional. I feel bereft. So not only is it, where you have this like gross out factor, this horror factor that, there are moments of absolute terror. It's, there's some beautiful line readings, like when Jeff Goldblum says, you know, I was an insect who dreamed he was a man and loved it,
Mm-hmm.
but now the insect is awake,
Mm-hmm.
and my humanity is gone. I mean, I didn't quote it verbatim because I didn't have that down, but it's very beautifully said and it breaks your heart. And I've heard some people compare it to the tragedy of seeing someone die slowly of like cancer or something evil, equally devastating. And then we've got, the emotional, Gina Davis finds out she's pregnant and she's deeply in love and she's watching and despite everything gross and some of the weird behavior, she still loves him. So there's so much going on. And Cronenberg, like, fuck, you killed that man. It was great.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and this goes for just wider horror in general. It doesn't necessarily just have to be specific to horror remakes. And it's one of the reasons why I think we all love the genre so much. Because, and this is why, I feel that the genre never ever gets the credit it deserves, because it makes you feel things. You know, yes, horror movies are there to terrify us. And they're there to show us, like, gore. And they're there to scare us and do all these things. But it makes you feel such emotions. And it goes back to that sort of cathartic thing that we've talked about many times as well, you know, about sort of, you're talking about like heartbreak and, how it's like a good representation for watching people, unfortunately, maybe die in front of you, and watching, people who have like terrible illnesses, and, they wither away, and they become shells of themselves. And for a movie to be able to make you feel that, and to portray that, and give you that representation on screen in this form as well, we're not talking about like that's actually what's happening. This is The Fly we're talking about here. So for a movie like this to be able to portray that, it just shows you what an incredible piece of filmmaking it actually is.
And with the practical effects, I mean, I'm always like practical effects, practical effects. I talk about it all the time. And one of the beauties of growing up with 80s horror as a child and being into it as a child, because my mother was this massive horror fan and Jeff Goldblum fan. I saw this as a child and was just terrified. And to this day, I mean, I just recently showed it to my youngest child, who's 17, and he was blown away. He was just like, "This is fucking amazing." And kids these days, I mean, my kids are Gen Z. Um, they're kind of hard to impress sometimes. You know, um, I'll share his thoughts on The Exorcist, and you'll be like, "Oh my God, what?" Um, when we covered that, but he really was just like, "That was fucking great,"
I
and
lo-
so like it holds up.
yeah, I really love it because there's not a lot of movies that make me do that. when you're sitting there and you're watching it, especially if you're watching something for the first time, there's not a lot of horror movie, not a lot of any movies, including horror movies, that I will sit there and halfway through it, I'll just be like, you know what, this is fucking awesome. And going back to Evil Dead 2013 was one of those movies. I literally paused the movie and I turned to my partner at the time and I was like, this movie fucking rocks. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot. I think I'm relatively difficult to impress as well. I got a reputation at the start of this podcast series for being, a lot harsher with my scores than Nico. I think I'm being a little bit more generous. I think as I get older, I'm getting a little more generous. But
I'm a generous rater, but I'm also a generous hater. I get very whatever I'm doing is very, very passionate. So
we've discovered that when we had our brief Lost Boys discussion on the last
yeah,
episode, Nico.
and there are some other ones that raise my hackles and where I physically am just like I just get very like red in the face. Like I don't know, this is what I love and this is my passion
Yeah.
is horror films. So it's gonna affect me one way or the other like that. It's gonna
So
be
The Fly is my number 4 pick. You've obviously revealed already that it is your number 3 pick.
yes.
So I'm just going to go ahead and give away my number 3 pick then. And this is my other one in here that I think it definitely deserves to be here in my opinion, but it is, I think, a little left field. It's The Invisible Man from 2020 with Elizabeth Moss and Oliver Jackson Cohen. Uh,
On That's an honorable mention.
yeah, I think this movie is absolutely fantastic, and going back to what we were talking about in The Fly about how this represents, how that represents, what we were discussing. This movie is like such a good representation of like abusive partners, abusive relationships, trauma, and what all that can do to you. It's such an amazing representation of that. Not only that, it's so tense. The tension in this film is just off the chain. I'm a big Lee Winnell fan anyway. Ever since Dead Silence, which he I think co-wrote with James Wan from Saw. And
Yeah, he was fantastic with the writing in Saw. I mean,
yeah,
it was hot. It was wonderful.
yeah. So I've always been a big Lee Winnell fan, and I was really excited about this because The Invisible Man I think is again a really great concept, and I was really excited to see what he would do with it, and I think he just absolutely knocked it out of the park. The acting in this is great. Elizabeth Moss is great anyway. She
Handmaid's Tale is probably my favorite show, and
mm,
I'm ready for that last season. I mean, when Elizabeth Moss like commits, she fucking commits, and she's a fantastic actress.
100%. And people often talk about horror performances that get snubbed by like the Oscars, and everyone always talks about Toni Collette in Hereditary, quite rightly too, and
Yes.
Lupita Nyong'o in Us, and I think
And
Elizabeth.
if I can throw a weird one in there, The Exorcist 3, I mean, the fucking Brad Dourif
Mm-hmm.
should have gotten a nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think Elizabeth Moss in The Invisible Man is in that category. That's how good I think her performance is in this. And like I say, it portrays such serious real life subjects as well, so well. It shows what it's like for people so well. So yeah, that for me like absolutely knocked it out of the park. Was I think back on the old show when we did the awards on the old show, I think Invisible Man like pretty much clean sweep that year and won like all the awards. But yeah, what's your thoughts?
Well, it really struck a chord with me. One, I'll say, if you don't know this, listeners, I am a big after horror or equally as much, I love classic films. And The Invisible Man, played by Claude Rains, is one of the classic Universal monsters. So it's so hard to fuck with those and do something right.
Mm-hmm.
It rarely goes right, but this is a fantastic update. And I myself am a survivor of a domestic abuse situation, and it hit that chord in me. It was done so well that, and it felt so real. They did their research, they knew what they were doing, and they said, hey, let's really up the ante. And you know in the original version, we watched Claude Rains become this monster as the Invisible Man, realizing like what bad things I can do. But this starts out with somebody who already is bad.
Hmm.
And how much worse can it get? And I mean, there are moments of shock in it. I really thought it was fantastic. It was edge of my seat. It was, it never sagged. It was never boring. And it was its own thing while being reverent. Like I said, that so it checks all the boxes. It
Hmm.
was fantastic.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, again, like you said, when Elizabeth Moss delivers, and like you say, you got to when you're fucking with something as especially in the horror community is universally loved as universal monsters, when you cannot fuck with Frankenstein and the mummy and all of these things, and you really need to make it your
All
own.
these millions of iterations of Dracula.
Yeah, exactly.
Some good, some not so.
Definitely some better than others. I think
Yes.
Christopher Lee, we will he gets a pass.
Christopher Lee gets a pass on fucking everything. He's like an elder god.
It's him and Vincent Price. That's it. Them two are like that's it for me. But
Yes.
yeah, so you're talking about like you say, and Elizabeth Moss. I keep going back to it. She was such just perfect casting for this movie. Like you say, when she delivers, she fucking delivers. She is such an incredible actress, and yeah, she was just so perfect for this movie. So that like I say, absolutely blown out of the park. Like you say, they clearly did their research. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they wanted to do, and they went out
And
and
they
did it.
managed to pull off a fantastic twist.
Mm-hmm.
You get this, there's several moments of just absolute shock.
I
Like
think
you're just completely blown away by it. Like we're on her journey.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So, anyways, all of that is why The Invisible Man takes my number 3 spot. So, I think for me, that's probably like my wild cards out the way. I think it's my second and first ones I think will be relatively predictable. But we'll get those in a minute. Now we're on to number twos. So, there we go. Would you like to reveal your number 2 pick?
Yeah, this is my wild card. This is a very much this is a film that everybody either loves, like obsessively loves, or incessantly hates. So this would be Suspiria 2018, directed by Luca Guadagnino, who I think is fantastic director. I've never been disappointed by him. Um, so from him to go from Call Me by Your Name to Suspiria, and so immediately, like, as a horror fan, you kind of keep in the know about, like, okay, what's coming out. And the moment that it was announced that, okay, Suspiria 2018 is actually, because I mean it was kind of like talked about and then put on the back burner, but it's like it's actually happening. And Giallo fans, Italian horror fans went fucking out of their minds. And keep in mind that I am a huge Giallo fan and Italian horror fan. I live it, I breathe it, I love it. And so I was actually excited because Argento can be so up his own ass. He's like the Italian Stanley Kubrick, like so fucking up his own ass, and everybody thinks that everything he does is great. I famously hate The Shining. I'm like, Stanley Kubrick, just shut the fuck up. Anyway, I feel like that about Argento, except for Tenebrae. Tenebrae gets a pass, but Suspiria was right for a remaking because when you watch the original film, everybody's like, "Oh, it's beautiful. It's a perfect film. It's his best film." Well, you know what? None of it makes any fucking sense. It's beautifully shot and it's got some cool visuals. The story doesn't, it's like, okay, so we've got this dance thing. And the first time our main character dances in Argento's, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go on for just a second on this. The first time our character, Susie, dances in this academy in Berlin, she falls down. She dances for like 2 seconds, and we don't even know. It's kind of ballet. We don't know, and it doesn't really matter. It's more of the setting.
Mhm.
Um, but Suspiria 2018, we've got a fucking phenomenal cast. We've got Tilda Swinton in 2 roles. This is a female centric movie. And what they did right to begin with was to make the dancing extremely important. They're like, okay, so here's our reference. It's in a dance school. It does involve witchcraft, but the dancing itself means something. And those shots are just because it's modern dance, so it's kind of like this abstract shit, but it's actually enacting the spells, so we get actual witchcraft, not. And I think the ending of the original Argento film is anticlimactic. This one will blow your fucking mind, literally. um it's a beautiful film. It's long. I love that it's kind of split into acts, and I think that was a brilliant move. And I think Dakota Johnson is just on fire in it. Um, Really, every Mia Goth is fantastic in it. Everyone is so on point, and it just that we've got Tom York doing the score, and that's another thing that rubbed our purists wrong. And like I said, I'm a huge Jala fan, but Goblin is famous. You know, it's prog rock stuff. Everybody's like, oh, Goblin soundtracks, and the Suspiria soundtrack by Goblin is great. But Tom York from Radiohead, one of my favorite bands, doing the score, it's haunting. It's beautiful. I don't know. It's just every fucking thing is right. I watched this movie so much. Um, and my kids speak German. We're big linguistics in our family. We all speak several languages. My kids speak German, and a lot of the film is in German, as it should be because it's Berlin. It feels very authentic. But they're like, please stop watching Suspiria. You watched it twice last week. I just get lost every time. It's like falling into a good book because I love to read. It's a beautiful story, and it's so well done. And the original Suspiria is not a good movie. Please, it needed to be remade. Please,
Oh,
yeah.
that's a controversial statement right there. That is a hot
Oh yeah,
take.
and I stand firm. Come at me.
So if you would like to, that's at Final Girl Can.
Yeah, come at me.
uh,
I
uh,
actually wrote a piece about it in Ghouls Magazine. And that's in my sort of portfolio because my dream is to be in Fangoria. And I think it's one of my best written pieces of journalism. I am a fiction writer, but I did do journalism. So I have a beautiful piece of work. Once I get our site up and running, which I'm working on, you will find it there, or I will link it when we either cover the film, if we do that, maybe,
wink,
or
wink, nudge, nudge.
we make nudge nudge. Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna do that film. But anyway, so you will see how passionate I am, and I think I'm very convincing on that.
I think as well that might be another very long episode.
Oh, so much to say. So, and that was my very me trying to cram so much into one little thing, and I went on for a minute here. So I'm sorry about that.
Oh no, it's absolutely fine. This is the joys about doing top 5 episodes, is trying to like abbreviate what you want to say about these movies that you absolutely fucking love into like little 2-3 minute chunks.
So the burning question is, what do you think of it?
So I'm also going to be controversial and agree with you that I don't think the original Suspiria is a particularly good movie. It makes no fucking
Thank
sense.
you.
It makes no fucking sense whatsoever.
No,
It's a very pretty, it's a beautiful, it's a pretty movie. It's a very pretty movie.
it's a
Um,
pretty movie with a great soundtrack.
yeah, absolutely, 100%. But the 2018 remake absolutely just blows it out of the water. That cat again, and it's a common theme about some shockingly about movies being at the tops of the list. The casting is great. Tell me a movie that Tilda Swinton has been in which she's not just like blown it out the water. I feel like just casting her alone in your movie kind of means you're going to get at least one good performance in there. But yeah, Dakota Johnson's fantastic as well. Like you say, Mia Goth's in there as well. And I think people always sort of forget that Mia Goth is there too because,
Yeah, they do.
people just now see Mia Goth and are just like, oh yeah, she was an X. And, she's like the new darling of horror. Although I
Well,
think,
you'd be surprised at how many people didn't know she was British, and she has this very girly, very proper British accent.
yeah,
So they were like, "Is she British? Was she's British?"
yeah,
There was this big shock recently when people found out that she was an American, that she is a very proper British girl.
yeah. And like you said, she is literally. I would say right now there are two darlings of horror, and Mia Goth is one of them. Jenna Ortega is the other. And they
Yeah.
obviously they were together in X. again,
Hmm.
a franchise I have some thoughts on, but
Yeah, and we'll be talking about that soon. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But yeah, no. So I am 100% in agreement with you. Suspiria is in my honorable mentions. It's not made my top five because it's not a movie that I've watched a lot of times. I've seen it I think twice.
I'm
Um,
obsessed with it. So
but I'm very, very, very much looking forward to going back and watching it again, and I'm very, very interested to potentially have a discussion about
we're gonna have
it.
yeah, a potentially wonderful discussion on that.
So, with that being said, we will move on to my number two pick. And, we talked earlier about, remaking sort of films that didn't do very well or bad films or films that you don't consider as good and making them. And sometimes it's really difficult to, come at a really, really classic property and something that is absolutely beloved. But for me, this movie did it absolutely fantastically. It's 2004's Dawn of the Dead. Um,
Honorable mention, yes.
Um, it's an see. I thought that might have been on your top five. Oh, I'm surprised.
I have my reasons,
Okay.
but it is fantastic.
I think this movie is absolutely fantastic, and they really really updated things. They they stuck really close to the source material and managed to make it their own at the same time. Zack Snyder is not my favorite director in the world.
No, we kind of talked about that with Army of the Dead.
Yeah, he's not my
He kind
favorite.
of blew his load with this release.
But you know what? If you're gonna have like one like absolutely fantastic film in there, his 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead is just it. Again, great cast in there as well. Anyone who can make Ty Burrell an absolute dickhead on screen is like you must be doing something right because he's just like the most likable person so much.
He's
But
like to kind of use some Looney Tunes in there. He's fucking despicable.
oh yeah, 100%. But Sarah Polley in there is great. Ving Rhames is great. We've got like huge props to everyone. They updated things. We know Zack Snyder does love a zombie baby, but we've got some really good effects in there as well. I just think this is a movie that they've taken an absolute classic property. The original Dawn of the Dead is a fantastic movie. I absolutely love it. And so that in itself, there it is.
I'm the Romero snob, you know me.
So yeah, I think this is how I think this is just a great example of how you do take a movie that is beloved. Like Dawn of the Dead is a beloved movie in the horror fandom. This is how you take
It's like the Holy Bible.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this is how you take a classic property like that and do a successful remake, in my opinion.
Well, for me, the thing was, it was sort of because Dawn of the Dead is like probably my favorite horror film of all time, if pressed. Like my phone case is Dawn of the Dead. Flyboy is my obsession. He's my next tattoo over here later this year. But so everyone expected that I would hate it. And I blew people away because I saw it in the theaters when it opened and I fucking loved it. And people were like, "How dare you?" Sort of that same thing we talked about with Suspiria. Like, how dare you? Dawn of the Dead is a classic. It's the best. It's one of the best zombie films of all fucking time. I agree with that. And they're like, "But it's almost sacrilegious." I'm like, no, they made it their own. Zack Snyder did a great job. Like I said, he blew his load with that because I hate every fucking thing else he's done. But he was fantastic with this. The running zombies piss people off. Um, but we've got these wonderful cameos. Um, it's reverent. I love that Tom Savini's in there. Um, Galen Ross was supposed to, but she was ill, so they named a store Galen Ross. We've got um, Indianapolis boy Ken Faree,
Yeah.
who when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. He's in it. Everybody's in it. It's just all the original cast in one way or another is in there, and it's just fantastic. It's amazing.
I think
And
I never really get why people are pissed off though with running zombies because you know what like I think this movie really can be credited with just like repopularizing the zombie subgenre as well because we've had so many we've had so many zombie movies, and listen, we've had so many zombie movies since that just failed to hit the mark. But not long after, I think this. When did Walking Dead start? That was not long after this as well. You know,
Yeah, it was about what,
so
2008,
yeah,
2009.
something
I
like
think
that.
maybe 2009.
But I think this is where I think you can really pinpoint, if you really want to boil it down and pinpoint, when did the zombie movie sort of subgenre really get popular again. I think this is the point, and then from here on it just boomed, and we've had so many zombie movies and TV shows since then.
A glut of it, you could
Yeah,
say, a
and
plethora.
it's very much been oversaturated once again.
I
But
still love it, but I'm picky.
yeah, 100%. But for me, this is just this is.
This was the shot of adrenaline that the genre needed. I
Mhm.
mean, Romero, I mean, if it wasn't basically before this, if it wasn't Romero or John Russo, who worked with Romero, with like, and he went on to do The Return of the Living Dead, which is one of the greatest films of all time. But if it's not that, then it was like it kind of sucked.
Yeah.
So, for Zack Snyder, who I don't like, to do a great job, I'm begrudgingly saying this is fantastic. And I left the theater pumped. I always have fun. This is one I enjoy watching with my kids a lot. They love it as well as the original. But it's just a fun film, and it does actually have moments that are emotional.
Mhm.
I think Zack Snyder's been riding that train for a while. Like, but hey, I did Dawn of the Dead 2004. It's like, yeah, but what have you done lately?
Yeah, it's very much if you left the theaters in 2004 and went, "Ooh, Zack Snyder, he's a director to watch," you
Right.
will be sorely disappointed.
Gonna put a gun to my head. Like, kind of like when Nico's like, let's do Army of the Dead. I'm like, I watched it and I was just like, man, fuck.
we had some choice things to say about Army of the
I
Dead.
ripped that thing a new asshole.
I mean, it is currently in 95th place of our 101 movie leaderboard, so we really, really disliked it. I
Massacred
mean,
it.
even Nico wasn't that high on it. He gave it a really low
Yeah, I
score
was
as
surprised.
well.
I was like, why did you make us watch this if you don't like
I
it?
feel like sometimes like I'll make us watch bad films, but it's because we can have fun with them and it's fun to rip things apart. There was nothing fun about.
There was no joy.
There was just
There
no,
was
yeah,
no
and that was
joy.
like one of your first episodes, like permanently on the show as well. And it was just like a welcome to the show, Candy. We're doing Army of the Dead.
Buckle up, buckaroo, because it's gonna be a hard ride.
So, um, we've both done now our fifth to second picks. Quickly, I'm just gonna rerun through them before we reveal our number ones. If I think you've gone the way you think, we may have the same number one.
I feel like we might, because it's almost like
Impossible to pick
required.
something
It's
else.
almost like required.
For my fifth place, I had 2010's The Crazies, The Fly from 1986 in fourth. I had 2020's Invisible Man in third, and 2004's Dawn of the Dead in second. Candy, you had Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003. You had Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1978. You had The Fly from 1986, and you had 2018's Suspiria in second place. But it is your turn, so we will find out if we have picked the same thing. I think we have.
I think so.
Candy, what is your number one horror remake?
It's undeniable that John Carpenter's The Thing is the best remake of all time. I mean, just the fucking best. And The Thing from Another World, the original film was not good. I mean, we had James Arness, who was famous for Gunsmoke. He's this big guy. You can see the zipper on him. I mean, it was just not a great film, but it was a great concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and Carpenter, God, every movie he made underappreciated, and it would become a cult classic. That's How You Live Forever is a cult classic,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately, commercially,
Oh, he
he,
bombed so hard.
that's why he just, like, he said, "Fuck it." He's so bitter now,
Yeah.
and I understand why, but I think I would embrace the love, the cult love. I mean, I have a feeling that The Thing is yours as well, because it's just, you have to recognize, we've got, Rob Bottin in there. We've got all these amazing effects, these practical fucking effects that blow your fucking mind every time, every fucking time I watch it. It's scary. It's got the paranoia. We're isolated. So even it feels claustrophobic, even though it's in this giant space of, uninhabitable land, which adds this extra layer of fear. Like, we're stranded and there's this thing, and who is it? I love the blood testing scene.
Mm.
um I mean, every time it's just, I don't know, I chills. It's fantastic. There's not a remake, and I love so many and the ones I've mentioned particularly, but this film is just it.
Yeah, it's no surprise to anyone that my number one pick is also John Carpenter's The Thing. This is one of my, if it is so close up there to being my favorite movie of all time. I often say it's my second favorite movie behind Halloween, which then makes you like no surprise that I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. I am
Myself included, yes.
John Carpenter to me is Romero to you, you know.
He is so close to Romero for me.
He-
Romero is and I will admit, as a huge Romero fan, not everything Romero did was great, but John Carpenter rarely, only on like maybe one occasion,
Ghost of Mars.
disappointed me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Ghost of Mars.
Yeah, yeah, that would be it. That's the one.
But like I say, he was such an underappreciated director at his time. Of course, now he gets the love from the horror community now. But for him, I think it was just like too little, too late sort of thing. And
He's kind
it's
of, if I can make a weird analogy
mhm.
because I'm a gamer, he's the Sega of horror directors. And the reason that Sega failed as a system, and the video game nerds coming out for a second, is because Sega was always way too ahead of its time.
Yeah.
If you understand what I'm saying, like Sega CD failed.
Hmm.
But then PlayStation comes along a little bit later and it does great. And it's the same fucking thing. Sega was always way too far ahead and then later appreciated.
Yeah.
So yeah, John Carpenter's the Sega of horror.
Yeah.
Just way, not appreciated, but often tried to be imitated because he was so great and so on top of things long before others were even there in that genre.
And then, like you say, we've alluded to it. This movie absolutely bombed at the theater. It went up against E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which of course is like one of the biggest movies from that time period. I would
This is the first movie I ever saw in the theaters.
I would much rather sit down and watch the thing. But like you say, the cast in here is incredible. We've got Kurt Russell, we've got Keith David, and I fucking love Keith David. I
Oh my
know
God,
you
Keith
love Keith
David.
David too.
Oh, yes.
But the cast in here is perfect. It's like you've said all the great things about it. It's so claustrophobic. The tension in it is incredible. That blood testing scene that you're talking about, that is like such a tense scene. But
One of the best scenes in horror, honestly.
and it is absolutely iconic scene. It's got some great lines in there. Don't want to spend the rest of their life tied to this fucking chair. And it's absolutely incredible. The effects are perfect. It stands up 100%. And it's one of those weird things because it leaves so many open questions that like we still to this day debate. Who is the thing at the end? Is anyone the thing at the end? Are they both the
Right,
thing
right.
at the end? We still debate that. And there's so many other questions throughout this movie that, you can talk about and debate and things that maybe we still don't know. And it's so, so good. It's very near to me to being a perfect movie. If
To
I,
me, it is a perfect film, and I would like to present a case just quickly. On my old show, The House That Screams, that was the most people I ever had on a show. My Zoom screen was full. I had 12 people on that show, and every fucking one of us gave it a 10.
yeah, like
It was like iconic.
mhm. It's absolutely incredible. for as much as I love all these other movies that we've talked about today, in terms of horror remakes, I like this blows all of them out the water as well. That's just how good this is, you know. And like I say, going back, John Carpenter, he was such an incredible director. I know Halloween's not like your biggest franchise in the world, but for me, like
I love three.
you do love three, but for me, Halloween is just like is the perfect movie. Then you've got this, and you know you did the Escape movies. You know you did it was so incredible,
And
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 it's
the less talked about In the Mouth of Madness, which was
mm-hmm.
like, and I have a feeling we might have to talk about that soon. Or it might magically be talked about on Pod of the Damned. But In the Mouth of Madness was fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean, mm.
and then you know They Live, Big Trouble in Little China, like
They live when they re-release. They Fathom events. I don't know if they do them over there, but Fathom events here in America, they do these. Like throughout the year they'll be like, okay, we're showing like I the one they just did was The Crow.
mm-hmm.
But they do several per month. And sometimes it's like an old Humphrey Bogart movie, which I worship at the altar of Humphrey Bogart. He is my favorite of the old dead men that I love. But they live for the 40th anniversary, and I went to the theater to see that, and that was a fucking great time.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite movies as well.
Yeah, it's great. Like so, like his back catalog of movies, like you know, to think about how little you know acclaim he actually got at the time, it makes me it makes me so sad because you know he is a master of horror. He just gets it. He knows exactly what kind of movie he wants to make. He knows the tone that he needs to set for each kind of movie because they're all tonally so different as well. But he just nails it every fucking time. And his
Even with Big Trouble in Little China, it's funny, it's
yeah.
got action, it's got sci-fi, it's got magic, it's got kung fu. It's fucking great, and it's so fucking amazing. Like and Kurt Russell, yeah, yeah,
Kurt Russell's just incredible. But I think the thing as well with The Thing, you know, John Carpenter is so well known as well for his really, really iconic scores. You know, the Halloween score is probably the most famous score in horror out there.
yeah. That and Tubular Bells from
Yeah,
The Exorcist, those two.
it is so iconic. It's you know reached this. It's in the zeitgeist. Like you can let people who have never seen a horror movie in their life listen to that Halloween score, and they will know where it is from.
Exactly,
You
yes.
know, and that's how successful. But the score for The Thing is so it's so toned down. It's so subtle, and you know that just adds to that tension as well. And I think that's just
That kind of creeping terror.
yeah, it's an absolute masterstroke, and it's like one of those things. Just because you're not there is no score doesn't mean there's no score, because
Right.
silence is also part of your score.
And silence is very important in The Thing.
Mm.
It's isolation. Isolation is a very big theme of it. Claustrophobia is a theme of it. Survival. I mean, it's stripped down. It's tense. I don't know. Just every fucking thing is fiery on all cylinders.
So just on that note, while we're talking about remakes and The Thing, how do you feel about the 2011 movie?
No, just no.
I mean,
It's like it's I'm going back to the Dare program. Just say no.
listen, I don't necessarily think the 2011 Thing is a bad movie. They just made some really bad choices. Like to not go with practical effects is the thing. The worst part is they filmed it with practical effects, and then
Yeah, and it's like, what are you doing? What are you thinking?
it's literally one of the biggest reasons why The Thing is so perfect is because how incredible the practical effects are in that film. Like they are
Even if
fantastic.
you watch it on Blu-ray, high and in high def, that shit is fucking amazing, and it still blows me away. I mean, every time I watch it, it's like I watched it for the first time.
Yeah,
It's so amazing.
and again, it was going back to like I was saying about The Thing as well. You know, you've got not The Thing, sorry, The Fly. It's gooey, it's gory, it's disgusting, and you know all of these things. And yeah, it's just it is for me. You know, I'll just it's a perfect movie. It is. There's
It is absolutely
I
perfect.
cannot think of an aspect of that movie that I dislike or I think has is it was done incorrectly or is age badly. Like it's a perfect movie.
I had a feeling like we were going to agree on this because it's almost like it's a rule.
Mm,
Like this is like the gold standard. This is the amazing to the point where there are so many horror fans out there that I've spoken to that don't even know that it's a
yeah,
remake.
yeah. Still to this day, yeah. And of
And they're
course,
like, should I watch the original? I'm like, if you're a completionist, yeah. And just so you can have that side by side comparison. But if you want to, you can just skip it,
yeah,
honestly. The thing is its own entity.
yeah, it is. It is 100%. And that is how you take a movie, you take a property, you put your stamp on it, and you fucking blow it out of the park. So, you know, well done, John Carpenter. Although I don't think he's listening. But if you are listening, John Carpenter, let us know. We'll
Well,
see.
and there's something that I always say there's the four horsemen of horror. There's Romero, there's Toby Hooper, Wes Craven, and John Carpenter. And John Carpenter must be protected at all costs. He's all we've got left.
Yeah, that's it. He's the last one. He's the last one standing.
He's the
Um,
last of the great, of the horsemen
yeah,
of horror.
yeah.
So, the fact that he's still there, and when you meet him in person, he doesn't he's so just kind of checked out because he was so underappreciated. He'll talk to you about sports.
Mm-hmm.
He'll talk to you about video games, and he's just kind of like, eh. I like to quote a saying from him where he's like, people were asking like, well, what do you think when people um want to keep doing these Halloween movies? He's like, it's amazing. I just hold out my hand and a check appears. That's how he feels about it.
I know,
And it's
and
that bitterness.
yeah. And the worst part about that is, the Halloween was a success. It's probably like one of his few movies that at the time was a success. It made money. It did, So, and that's
It birthed the modern slasher.
yeah. And it's so sad when you listen to that because whether or not he wanted there to be more Halloween movies, we all know what his plan was. We all know what he wanted to do. We all know that they wanted to do a different thing, which is where Halloween 3 came from, but, the for
I remind people of that all the time.
for other factors, there was more Michael Myers movies made. And whether people think that's for better or for worse is entirely up for them. I'm going to say it, there's not a lot of great Halloween movies after that original. I think there's a few that have merit, and, Mikey is my boy, and,
Yeah.
I really, really, I will watch anything with Michael Myers in it. I actually rewatched Halloween Resurrection a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, bless your heart.
Well, it was more to show my partner Busta Rhymes roundhouse kicking him out of a top floor
That's
window.
kind of the only reason to watch that movie.
And
To
then
be
at the end,
fair.
just going, trick or treat, motherfucker.
But what the fuck were they thinking putting Buster Rhymes in the fucking movie?
The worst part is, all I wanted from that movie was to see Tyra Banks get brutally murdered, and she dies off camera.
Yeah, you're just like, what?
No, listen, there are some fucking abysmal Halloween movies out there.
Yes.
Halloween Resurrection is one of
David
them.
Gordon Green, I'm looking at you motherfucker.
I'm not going to get into too big a debate about you with this. Halloween, no, I'm not. No, Halloween 2018 is probably my second favorite Halloween movie, but that is definitely a discussion for another day.
It is what my kids would call mid.
Okay. I'm just yeah. Whenever we do more Halloween movies, because we've done 3 of them on the show now, we I think me and you should maybe do a little Halloween 3 revisit at some point.
Yes. I have so much trivia. I have so many cool things and collectibles. Yes.
I listen. Again, I think it was one of the movies I re-ranked in my 100th episode because, again, it's a movie I was really, really mean to when we did the episode. Nico, he hates it. He really hates
Oh, I
Halloween
know.
3.
He said some things to me, but I got him back with Lost Boys. When I hit Lost Boys, he's like,
you
oh, that I hit him where it hurt, and so
yeah.
he hit me where it hurt with Halloween 3, and I'm like, I got you though.
Yeah,
I got
yeah,
you back.
that's fine. I'm very happy you did that because you know what? You hurt the Lost Boys in its ranking way more than Nico hurt Halloween 3. Because between you adding in your score and me re-ranking it, Halloween 3 did jump quite a few places up the leaderboard, but you really hurt the Lost Boys. You dropped that thing like 20 places or
But
something like
I
that.
want it. I want it on the record though that I didn't do it out of spite.
No.
I honestly do feel that way, and that's kind of if you're familiar with any of my former, like my former show or any of my other appearances, it shouldn't have been a surprise to
No, it
anyone.
absolutely wasn't a surprise. But so yeah, the
But Near
thing.
Dark, yes.
Yeah, but yeah, so John Carpenter's the thing for me. Absolutely number one. As soon as you messaged in the chat earlier being like, let's do remakes, I was like, yes. I already knew the majority of my list straight off the bat, and that there was never in doubt, it was never in question that the thing was going to take number
Yeah, that
one
was the
spot.
first thing I filled in, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, now I got to figure out the rest of these four, how I want
Um,
them.
we've done a few honorable mentions already. I'm gonna just do another couple of honorable mentions of if you have any others that you would like to throw in as well. I would like to throw in and um I just tongue tied myself. Sorry. I'm gonna throw in Cape Fear in there as an honorable mention.
Yeah, I didn't think of that, but once you, yeah, I agree. I
Yeah, I
agree.
I know Nico is a massive fan of Cape Fear. Like he really loves that movie. And
I
I'm
love the original, but they really did some great things with that remake.
yeah, and I'm sure there are movies
And I
that
love Juliette Lewis.
yeah.
Sorry.
And I'm sure there are movies that Nico's going to make us cover at some point. I'm going to throw in a slight wild card here in my honorable mentions as well. The 2022 reboot of Hellraiser. Now, it's not a patch on the original movie. I don't think you can ever make a Hellraiser movie that's going to come real close to what they did in those first two movies, because the first two Hellraiser movies, again, are pretty close to perfection for me. I think they're fantastic movies.
I
Absolutely
agree
love
with
them.
you. I actually love two more than I love one.
Yeah, well, again, I think that's one of the episodes I did on your old show was Hellraiser 2. Or was it?
Yes.
No,
No,
yes.
you did the first one,
I did the first
and
one, but
then yeah,
I think almost all of us, I think, agreed that, Hellraiser's great. Hellraiser 2 is just that little bit better.
it's
Um,
just slightly.
yeah, it's really tight. But,
It's a good 1-2
you
punch.
know what, like, they're after that, the sequels go downhill, and they go downhill hard. Like, real fucking hard. And so I didn't hold out a lot of hope for 2022. And it has some issues, but I think it's like a really nice remake to get people hopefully kinda back into the franchise and hyped up a little bit. I think there's some decent performances in there. I think there's some nice effects, and they add in some cool stuff as well. And I think they did a really good job. Listen, it's always going to be difficult when Doug Bradley isn't Pinhead, but I think Jamie Clayton actually did a really good job of portraying Pinhead.
I actually haven't seen it. Um, Hellraiser is more of Sean's thing,
Yeah.
so I kind of stop at two, but um, Sean's just a big Clive Barker fan, and I like Clive Barker. I like him as a person. I think he's funny as fuck. But he gets a little, like Sean loves Nightbreed, and I just can't. I can't. I like it. I can't love it. You know.
Listen, Clive Barker is a great author, like a great author. I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
love him.
Exactly.
I love his stuff.
Exactly.
So just a couple. I'm gonna just fire through a couple more, and then I'll let you have your honorable mention. So one missed call. No, I'm only joking.
Ah, no.
No, I would never put that piece of shit in my
Oh,
honorable mentions. We kind of talked about this last time. I'm gonna throw out a mention for The Grudge. I think that's a decent remake. I think that's good fun, and like you like they to go back. They kept back in the Japanese setting, and they stuck to the sort of vibe that you needed to go to, like rather than fully Americanizing it, like we talked about certain things when we were on our last episode. So I'm gonna throw The Grudge in there. The Blob as well. I'm gonna throw in there too.
yeah, those are actually very similar. I um I agree with The Grudge because actually it was the same director,
Hmm.
and keeping it in that Japanese setting. One, I am in love with Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Yeah, who isn't?
Um she's fantastic. Um I actually think there are a lot of good improvements by the, and I love, like I said, that it's the original director of Ju-on the Grudge.
Yeah.
So it did it right where we went through this kind of J horror remake boom. I think The Ring fucking sucks. I think One Missed Call fucking sucks. They Americanized it, and all of them, and they made them PG-13, and especially when you take it to Takashi Miike film known for Audition and Ichi the Killer and shit like that, and you make it PG-13, go fuck yourself. What are you fucking thinking? Like, okay, anyway. But The Grudge,
This definitely isn't a little window into an upcoming episode. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
yeah. So The Grudge, yeah, it kept the culture in there, and yeah, I agree with that. And I would like to throw out a really wild one. Um, but if you know me, it's not a surprise, but it may surprise people who maybe only know me from Pod of the Damned. Bram Stoker's Dracula, and
Yes.
I'm a massive vampire fan. I'm a massive Bela Lugosi fan. Um, but the actual original Dracula, I mean, perfect casting because Bela Lugosi is Hungarian, and it just fits. But he's actually in the movie for maybe 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and the rest of it kind of drags. It's worth it for those 15 minutes because it's fucking perfect.
Hmm.
But Bram Stoker's Dracula, done by Coppola, one, I was 13 when that came out, and my hormones were going crazy. um I was equally in love with Winona Ryder in it. And I know everybody shits on Keanu Reeves in it, and I'm not going to talk about that. But because I love Keanu Reeves,
Yeah,
and
who doesn't?
he's like the guy. He's the dude. He's amazing. But I was also in love with Gary Oldman, especially not in the older form, but once he becomes young,
Hmm.
I was just like, who? And and I loved to read, and I was a very precocious reader, and reading Dracula is a very tough assignment. I mean, I majored in literature and in college, and I studied it throughout my life. It's written in epistolatory style, which is like letters. It's not an easy read.
Yeah.
So Coppola took that and did this very gothic, very atmospheric, beautiful film, and really capitalized on the blood story. There is a scene in it that is so sexy without having sex, where it's very passionate, where he cuts his chest and she drinks the blood from it. It's so sexually charged. I mean, when I was 13, my hormones were like, what? Why is this so? Why do I feel so funny? Why do I want to be a third here? But uh, it was I just think that people shit on that movie too much. They make fun of Keanu Reeves in it, which is fine, whatever you want. But the movie itself redeems. I mean, it's just really great. It didn't make my top five, but it is
Yeah.
way up there for me, and I defend it with. I'll die on that hill.
Yeah, no, but again, it probably just didn't make my honorable mentions more because of oversight than anything else. I love that movie too. Yeah, like you say, you can shit on Keanu Reeves all you want, but the cast, like the cast is great. Like, you go through that list and
And
it.
honestly, Keanu Reeves isn't as bad as everybody likes to make him out in that
No,
movie.
no,
He was very exhausted, and yeah, his accent isn't great, but it's not as bad as everyone says.
yeah, 100%. But yeah, no, definitely a movie for me that definitely deserves to be in that honorable mentions. It wasn't a movie I would have ever considered to be in my top five, but it's a great movie. I love it. It's one I revisit relatively
I have
often.
one more, um, and I didn't put it in my top five just because I don't know where to place it. It should be in there, but it's Night of the Living Dead 1990, which absolutely got no flowers. It was Tom Savini's directing debut, and you guys all know I love fucking Tom Savini. I've met this man more than I've met any other celebrity. I have a $200 figure. It's from Maniac that I have Tom Savini signed. I meet him all the time. I have a million pictures of just me and Tom Savini. But he did a fantastic job, and people are just now. I also wrote a very beautiful article about this film, actually comparing it to the original Night of the Living Dead, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's just so well done.
Hmm.
Tony Todd is the only person that could have stepped into Dwayne Jones' shoes. The only man alive that could have done it, and he fucking knocked it out of the park. I mean, um, just the entire cast is phenomenal. It's updated in just the right ways, and it just got buried and got shit on. Like, how dare you remake it? Fucking George Romero wrote the script to Night of the Living Dead 90, and Tom Savini it is just a broken man over this.
Yeah.
But just now, just in recent times, people are starting to go, hey, wait a minute. And there's a fantastic book that Tom Savini wrote. Um, you can, jump on Amazon and get it. It's called Night of the Living Dead 1990, the version you've never seen, with all this storyboards and things that were cut out because people were like, it wasn't gory enough, it didn't do this enough. The studio kind of came in and fucked them. But I still think the end result is a fantastic remake. I just didn't even know where to place it. It's unplaceable for me.
Yeah, listen, like you say, if you're gonna remake something like that, and you're gonna have to put like decide whose hands is this gonna be like the safest in. I feel like Tom Savini, even though it's his debut, that's such a safe pair of hands for that movie, that property as well. And like you say, Romero wrote the script, so it literally has his seal of approval on it.
And the bromance between the two of them was very real.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
they were best friends.
Hmm.
And so they worked together for a very, very long time. Friends, till George, obviously passed away. I mean, they were still really best friends. And so it was just like, I just think people are just now coming around to it. And if you haven't come around to it yet and you're listening to this, go rewatch it. Do yourself a favor.
You know what? Like doing this episode, there's a few movies we've talked about where I've been like, you know what? I haven't revisited that in a hot minute. I'm gonna go revisit it, and that's definitely one of them. I think I'm gonna go revisit. Um,
I watch that movie all the time. It is a classic in my home.
yeah. So yeah, I think I might definitely do that. But yeah. So there we go. There we have it. That is our top five. We somehow managed to whittle ourselves down. Do a top five. Do some honorable mentions in there as
It
well.
was tough,
It,
but
it, yeah, I love doing these kind of episodes because it is tough, especially when like you boil it down. Like I've got some really good, interesting topics lined up for us to be doing top fives because this is a series that I do want to sort of bring back to the show because I think they're really fun to do, and it's nice to do something a little different and maybe just take a break from our sort of regular reviews that we do. And I have some really interesting topics that I want to
yeah,
talk about.
spice it up,
Spice up a little bit, and we can definitely. We were largely in agreement, although we did only have two things the same. We had the thing, and we both had the fly. Everything else, we
But those are the gold standards,
yeah, of
really.
course. And so yeah, it's always really interesting. Nico always has some interesting picks when he does these as well, so I'm sure he's going to have a few interesting things to do for some other topics come up. But do if you're listening to this, stay tuned for further episodes of if you like a top five series. Like I say, go back and check out our top 10 horror movies from the 1980s. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone what my number one pick on that one was as well. I'm pretty sure it was John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like, I don't know, like it's a gimme. It's a
Yeah,
required. It's gonna be on that list and almost everybody's list, every horror fan's list, it's gonna be in
yeah.
that top five.
But
It,
listen,
it almost probably number one most of the
yeah.
time.
But listen, we're gonna have a load of different topics coming up. We've like I said done the 1980s, but we'll be doing ones for all the decades. We'll be doing ones for zombie movies, werewolf movies, vampire movies. We'll be doing horror video games. We'll be doing all of these different things. Horror TV shows, horror novels. All of this stuff will be coming
Novels. Oh yeah, fuck yeah. I'm
down the
so
line.
excited.
That again, I don't think Nico will join us for the novels since he can't read.
I am an avid reader. Like I said, I majored in literature. I'm that kind of nerd.
Yeah.
So that is absolutely my thing.
I'll just qualify that Nico can read. He's just very dyslexic.
He loves Stephen King, so I mean, he puts in the work, and I applaud that
Yeah, of
because
course.
he's absolutely worth it. He struggles with his dyslexia to read some of the best horror fiction that's ever existed.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, stay tuned for all of that. Just on that.
Did you want to do a my retroactive.
Yeah, we'll quickly throw in one of your catch ups. So we'll do that
See what else I can fuck up on the leaderboard.
just before we do that. Just want to point out as well there because you mentioned Sarah Michelle Gellar when we were talking about The Grudge there, and I just want to point like I think she's someone who she's really beloved by the horror fandom, but I don't ever think she's like considered to be like up there. You know how we when we talk about people like Vincent Price and Christopher Lee. And listen, I'm not saying Sarah Michelle Gellar is those, right?
Oh no,
But
no, no.
but I
Much
think,
as I love her,
but I really do think she's someone who has been vitally important to horror, and she has made a massive contribution to the genre. You know,
and no one ever calls her a scream queen, and she's earned that
a
shit.
hundred
She's earned her
percent,
crown.
and like she is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which for so many of us was such a huge program for us growing up. For a lot of people, that was their gateway into horror was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and she's went on to do some really incredible things as well in the genre. And I just want to point out, like she did make the shortlist of nominations this year to be in our Horror Hall of Fame, and I just wanted to point that out because I really think she deserves that love.
She does. She's amazing, and I gotta say, I mean, I'm a big cartoon fan as well, and I really love the live action Scooby Doo's.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be really honest with you. What sold me on it was her and Freddie Prinze Jr., who I think are an adorable couple. Um, I love. I mean, I don't know. That was out of left field, but I do love her in the Scooby Doo movies.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course, when you've got Matthew Lillard in there as well, absolutely
Oh God, you know how I feel about Matthew
he
Lillard.
is
I fucking
absolutely
love him.
killing it. Yeah,
And then in the second movie, we've got my other man, Seth Green. I mean, it's just killer cast.
yeah, 100%. They, you know what, they are underrated movies. Okay, right. So we're gonna do your catch up. So this is obviously kind of I say recently. It's been a hot minute now. You've joined us as a permanent host, which means you obviously have not reviewed or not scored at least a number of the movies that are currently on our leaderboard. So this is where we go back each episode and give you the opportunity to put your rating in for a few of those movies and see what that shakes up on the leaderboard. So today the first movie I would like your rating for, and I'm only picking it because we mentioned it earlier on, is Evil Dead Rise.
Um, where is that on the leaderboard? Because I just kind of have this.
It's currently
There-
sitting in 34th place.
Okay, so um, it was one of the last movies I did on my old show,
Mm-hmm.
and I rated it a little higher when I first saw it because I saw it opening weekend, and then I went back and watched it, and I was kind of comparing it to the rest of the series. I just don't think it's as strong, especially coming after Fede Alvarez's 2013. I gave it a 7.5 though.
That's still a very respectable score.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not a bad movie in, like we said at the beginning, there's not a bad movie in that series.
No, there's definitely not. And you know what? Like you're not a million miles away from what we scored it. I gave it an 8. Nico really loved it. He gave it an 8.5. He was a big fan of the movie. So yeah. And the average score for it was a 7.7, so you're right on there anyway. It still has a 7.7 and it has not moved on the leaderboard, so it stays in 34th place. So we haven't
All right.
fucked things up for Evil Dead Rise. um
Wow.
I think that's the first time that's happened, to be
I must say,
fair.
yeah, I think it's the first time I haven't shifted everything.
So the second movie I would like you to score for me is Hocus Pocus from 1993. It's currently sitting in 59th.
Um, I am not a fan of Hocus Pocus.
Ooh.
I love Disney films, but I'm a very girly girl. I like the princess stuff, but I do love like Nightmare Before Christmas. But Hocus Pocus was, I think I was too old when it came about. It was my brothers are 4 years younger than me, my twin brothers, and it's more their thing. I felt it was a little childish for me because I was watching gore films. So and that hasn't changed for me how I feel about it. I've tried it again. So I give it a 4.5.
That is a low score.
I just don't love it. It's not a bad movie. It's just not a good movie.
Listen, I totally get what you're saying, and I think for me it very much came out at the perfect time because this
Yeah,
came out.
because you're younger than I
Yeah,
am.
so this came out 2 years after I was born. So by the time I was like 6, 7 years old, this was just like there, and it was perfect. And you know what? I love Bette Midler,
It was
and
sort of your monster squad, I
yeah,
guess.
100%. And Bette Midler for me, and Kathy Najimy and Sarah Jessica Park, they absolutely kill it in this movie. I think they just chew that scenery so much, and you can really tell how much fun, especially like those three are having whilst they're making this movie. And you know what, like the sequel is
Mm.
well, maybe not say too much about it, but I think this is like me and Nico was really high in as well. We both gave this movie an 8. So
Oh
we're
wow.
so we're like really like
But I know it is very beloved. It's
yeah.
just not beloved
Yeah,
by
no, and
me.
I get that. And yeah, you have moved it down the leaderboard. So it was in 59th place with an average of 6.7. It's now in 66th place with an average of 6.4. So it's not moved down like a huge amount, but it's dropped 7 places. Not too bad.
Okay.
And you know what? Like for the third movie, I'd be remiss if I went through an entire episode without mentioning a certain franchise. So currently in 74th place, I would like you to tell me your score for Terrifier.
um, the first Terrifier, I am a fan. Um, Terrifier 2 is a million times better. So, in that regard, I have to give my love to Terrifier. There's some greatness there. Terrifier 2 just blew it out of the water though, but I did give it a 7.
Okay.
Um, I think that it's an important film. I think it's bringing back slashers. It's given us a new slasher icon that's a million times better than Ghostface. Million times better. Thank fucking God. It's Art the Clown. I love him and I have fun with them and I laugh at gore. It's a laugh fest for me. So yeah, it's a 7.
There's my Art the Clown there in the background. So it's no secret. Listen, if you've ever listened to this podcast before and haven't figured out that I'm a huge Terrifier fan, I
I am
think.
also a huge Terrifier fan. So for me, that was a low score, but it
So would
but
it
yeah.
would it surprise you to know that you've actually just scored it higher than I scored it?
Oh, holy shit. Wow.
So for as much as I love Terrifier, and you're right, Art the Clown is absolutely the horror icon of this age. He is this generation's horror icon. He is the Freddy Krueger of the 2020s. He
And I
is,
am fucking licking that right
you
up. I
know,
love it.
David Howard Thornton absolutely fucking kills it. And props to Mike Gianelli who portrayed Art the Clown in All Hallows Eve
All
as
Hallows
well,
Eve.
because he did a really great job with the character too, although slightly differently. But David Howard Thornton's been knocking it out of the park. However, there are issues with Terrifier.
There are.
There are issues with Terrifier.
I knocked points off for it.
And so when we reviewed it, my score was a 6.5, but it was a 6.5 with the preface that I fucking love this movie, but I just felt like I couldn't score it any higher, like
Same.
because of the issues.
Seven was where I could
Um,
the highest I could do.
I'm with you. Like Terrifier 2 for me is incredible. What like that they so knocked it out of the park. But I think with that first movie, what they achieved on so little money as well. That movie was made for pennies, and what they managed to achieve with it, they got like for there has been, things levied at the movie about, the script being like misogynistic and things like that. And,
It's
people
a slasher film. I mean, it's kind of de rigueur to do that. Not that I'm okay with misogyny, but I mean, I think if you're gonna come out and really try to recapture the kind of wonderful slasher icons of the 80s, you really it's kind of needed to happen,
yeah.
but it also grows as the series continues. And let me tell you, I am fucking pumped for 3.
Oh, I am so excited for free.
It's a family event for us. Like me, my kids, my husband, we're all like, holy fucking shit, we can't wait.
Well, the thing is, like with Terrifier 2, it was like the little train that could, wasn't it? Like it got that really limited theater run, and it just kept on going, and I in modern times, I don't think I've actually seen anything quite like it in terms of getting a really limited theater run, and then it just kept getting extended and was getting
Yeah, I
shown
saw
in
the
more.
drive-in because it was a great summer release.
Hmm.
And it was just the perfect it felt like a drive-in film because everyone knows I'm a huge Joe Bob fan. I'm a huge exploitation fan. I'm a huge this is my kind of fucking movie. And we finally have this feels as wonderful as Freddy Krueger felt to me in the 80s.
Yeah, it
Art the
is.
Clown is fucking
Yeah.
my shit right there. I
Um,
love it.
Nico was not. Nico's not a huge fan of the Terrifier franchise. He did score the first movie slightly higher than he scored the sequel, so he actually prefers the first movie.
I've met a couple people that do,
And
but
we,
I thought the second movie was just fucking chef's kiss.
yeah, I'm really, like I say, I'm really, really excited to see what
I
they do
met
with it.
Damien Leone, and I have his signature in there. I have all my goodies, and I need to show off some more. But he has signed my 4K
Mm.
Blu-ray of it, and wrote a cool message on there. And he's really an impressive man.
One of my greatest regrets about podcasting, it was for the old show, and it was back when I used to regularly get some guests on the show, and some more famous guests as well. We had people like Naomi Grossman on the show. We had people like from the movie Host on the show. And I had David Howard Thornton. I'd had him lined up. We were trying to align schedules, and unfortunately, like, it just fell through. We just like couldn't make it work to get him on the show, and it's like my biggest regret is that I never actually managed to get David Howard Thornton on the show, because he is such a cool guy as well. I've listened to him on a number of other podcasts and seen him on a number of other shows, and he's so funny. He's really incredible, and like he.
In very high demand. When I go to horror cons, his lines
Mm.
are absolutely bonkers. But never say never. There's,
Never say never. I think it's
never
something
say
I'm.
never. We could get him, because I'm the little podcaster that could as well.
It's just like,
So
but again, it's just one of those things, isn't it? They've made these two films, and even though the second one was bigger budget, it was still a shoestring budget. I think we were talking about, I think, was it about £250,000 they made the sequel for, and that was just in comparison to, I think, about 40,000 that they made the original for. The third movie does have a bigger budget again. It
and
finally.
that is scaring some of the fans. And
It
I'm
is
like,
scaring some of the
come
fans.
on, give it a break.
However,
Let's
like, one of the things that I think should put people at rest is that Damien Leone has rejected the movie from studios. It's still an independent movie, and
Yes.
that's just going to allow him to continue to do whatever the fuck he wants. And he's sticking, it's still going to be all practical effects, and you've got David Howard Thornton there. It's going to be a fuck. We might finally have a really good fucking Christmas horror film.
I'm so fucking ready. This is a family event for me. My mom, my kids, my husband, me. Like we're fucking already like,
Well,
yes.
what I'm really hoping for, because I'm not quite aware if it's going to happen yet or not, but obviously talking about Terrifier 2's theatre run, neither of the Terrifier movies got a theatre release here in the UK. If it did, it was very, very, very limited and nowhere near where I live. So I've not been able to see either of these movies in the theatre. So I really, really hope Terrifier 3 gets a somewhat of a theatre run here in the UK.
I'm gonna manifest it for you. I'm just
Thank you.
gonna.
So if the listeners at home could do that for me as well, that would be fantastic. But yeah, so Terrifier, your score of 7. It bumps it up. It bumps it up 2 places on the leaderboard. So it's gone from 74th to 72nd. I still think that's like too low for the movie. Terrifier
Yeah, I
2.
agree.
Terrifier 2 is further up the leaderboard, but again, not in like a massively high place. Terrifier 2 currently sits in 54th place.
Oh, that's a damn
I
shame.
think I think that they are polarizing movies, though. They are very polarizing. I very rarely meet someone who's just like, you know what, they're fine. I think
Yeah,
people
people
generally.
usually lean very
Yeah.
passionately, like one way or the
Yeah.
other.
And we literally have had, a friend of the podcast and someone who was on the show and on the Terrifier episode say he will never fucking come on the show again to talk
Oh,
about
Ren.
Terrifier. Yeah. I don't know why you decided to come on for that episode. I think you could have
You
easily.
know, when I was doing the House that Screams, my old show, he would only come on and do movies that were absolutely terrible, like Dolls. I love Brian Usna, but that thing's a fucking steaming pile of shit. It's a fun steaming pile of shit. And he did like Deadly Friend, which is absolute ass. And I'm like, Ren, why do you only come on for terrible movies? Why don't you ever do any good movies with us? So um, but we're gonna be getting him soon for a movie that I know he loves.
Oh yes, oh
So
yes, and but if you want
that's
to,
gonna
if
be exciting.
but you will have to subscribe to our Patreon to get
Yes.
that, because it's our non-horror movie.
Yeah, and it's a fucking and you guys voted for it. So I promise you I will deliver. I've got some great goodies to show off for the Patreon
Yeah.
for that.
Speaking of Ren as well, like he did do a good movie. Well, I think he's done two good movies on this podcast because he did Terrifier, even though he definitely didn't think so. He rated Terrifier 4. Ren.
Oh, Ren.
But Nico didn't do
But
much.
we
But
love Ren.
we do love Ren. So go check out that episode if you haven't listened to it. If you want to hear Ren's other episode he's done for us, he was also on our episode of Black Phone, which is a great modern movie. A really, really
Oh
good
my God,
movie.
loved it. I saw it like 3 times in the theaters.
Yeah, so go check out that episode as well.
And I don't usually like Blumhouse films.
Yeah, it's
They're
Blumhouse.
kind of like the junk food horror. They're the big budget horror films that are more for like your casual viewers. They don't impress me much. But the Black Phone, yeah, it fucking did.
I think the,
Surprise,
I think
surprise.
the thing normally with Blumhouse for me is they feel very paint by numbers.
Yeah, it feels like for your casual horror fans, like,
Yeah.
oh, look at us, we're going out to see a horror movie. Now for like your hardcore horror fans, they're like, he does shit like Megan, which,
Oh, do not get me
oh,
started on
mm.
Megan.
That's another movie that if it were a person, I'd kick its ass. I would
It,
physically fight
that
it.
is one of the movies I think where me and Nico have been the most polarizing because surprise, surprise, Candy, Nico really likes Megan.
You know, that boy ain't right. No, I'm kidding.
No, 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 you're not wrong. He ain't right. Yeah, he actually scored Megan an 8.5. That's
Dear Lord,
whereas I gave it a 3. So that just shows you like where we are there with that movie.
well, you and I are in agreement
I fucking hate that movie so much.
because
Um
I would give it a 3 or a 2.5.
yeah, so anyways, thank you for those ratings. We are, 3 steps closer to you being fully caught up with the leaderboard, and we'll let you pick a few more next time as well.
Awesome.
If you're listening to this, please go check out all of those episodes. Check out our next episode. Our next episode that we were supposed to be recording while we're recording this episode, but schedules will be on The Exorcist. Like I said in our Let the Right One In episode, I think this is probably one of the few movies left that I think could realistically take that top spot away from Aliens. It's gonna take some doing, and I don't think there's many big horror movies out there that are so widely just loved by the genre, the fan base, that could realistically now take our top spot. Listen, there's some great movies out there, but a lot of them are polarizing or have their detractors. But you think we've already done Halloween, we've already done Jaws, we've done the first two Alien movies, The Thing's out there, Nightmare on
Let's
Elm
see the
Street's been
thing. Yeah.
done, The Omen's been done, Misery's been done, all these big blockbusters. The Shining's been done. I know your thoughts on The Shining, but The
I'm
Shining,
so glad I wasn't there for that.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre's been done, Candyman's been done.
Sorry, I missed that.
All of these movies that you think, you know what, that one could challenge. They're all done, and Aliens currently sits at the top of the pile. So I think The Exorcist
Yeah,
is.
but I did Candyman with you, actually.
You did do Candyman with us, and you know what? It sits there in a very, 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 very respectable place. It's currently 26th on the leaderboard. It's in a very respectable. I think now you would say Candyman in 26th, but I think when you think that we've done 101 movies now, like it's in there, it's in that top sort of tier of horror movies. And I think, when you sit there and you look at some of the movies that are in, our sort of top 20 movies, and, I've just named like the top ones. You've got, Aliens, Alien, Jaws, Halloween, and, Let the Right One In that we covered, last on the show, breaking into that top 5. And I really love it when some more modern movies make it up there as well, because, like modern horror gets a lot of shit. And even though I think we're going through this really great period of horror right now,
Yeah,
you
we're
know,
having a golden age that we haven't had since the 80s
yeah,
right now.
but you
It's a
know,
wonderful time to be a horror fan.
it is a wonderful time to be a horror fan. But you know, you'll always get those sort of people who are just like, you know, 80s was the best and everything else is shit and
I
everything
mean,
else
I'm partial
sucks.
to the 80s because
Listen, I
that's
love it.
where I cut my teeth on it. But
Yeah, listen,
um,
I love 80s movies too, but you know what? When I sit there and I think about my favorite horror movies of all time, they all come from the fucking 1970s. So fuck the 80s, the 70s were better.
oh yeah, the 70s were on fire. Oh fuck, yeah, they were amazing.
But you know, like I say, Misery, The Thing, Reanimator still in our top 10, The Omen's there,
Yes.
Nightmare on Elm Street's there, and then, you know, we've got Hereditary, we've got Late Night with the Devil that you did recently as well, the Shining, you know, Near Dark, The
That movie.
Descent, you know, but like, these are great, great horror movies in there, so for Candyman to be 26 is no slight on that movie as well, so.
Fantastic. I just showed it to Ash for the first time, my youngest and my 17-year-old, and he doesn't usually like sort of a slow burn or an atmospheric type movie. He's very particular, and he loved it. I mean, from the score to I was so proud as a mom, like fuck yeah.
So yeah, yeah, like I say, that's it. That's where we're sitting with the leaderboard. Don't forget, people, if you guys like have a horror movie that you would like us to consider covering, let us know that as well. If there's a horror movie that you just want to know where it sits in our leaderboard, because there is actually probably like a bad thing for a podcast with leaderboard. There is actually no place where you can access our leaderboard other
Well,
than
right now I am working on our website,
yes.
which will be uploaded. It will have the leaderboard and the changes. There will be my my journalistic writings. I am a writer. That is what I went to school for. And I think I'm pretty good at it. I've been told. Working, and my dream is to get into Fangoria, so everybody manifest that for me. It's my dream. But yeah, so we will have these updates, and just all of this information for you, and all the cool links. And we want to feature a lot of stuff from you guys, the listeners. So as that develops, which will be happening soon, we will get that out there for you, and it's going to be everything all in one place. Yeah.
Um, just on a note before we get out of here, because I know we're starting to
Yeah, I
travel
gotta
on,
go cook dinner.
traveling on with time. The Twitch is active again. So obviously for those who know, we used to stream our episodes live, and then we stopped doing that for a while just for some actives. We're not going to go back to necessarily streaming episodes live, at least not right now, especially when it's kind of difficult for us to always get our schedules in order. So
Yeah.
we're not going to commit to doing that right now. But I will be streaming video game playthroughs, and over the summer we will be having a big charity stream as well for some causes that are very, very close to our hearts.
And we're
Um,
putting a lot of really great, and it's going to be a good time and for good causes.
yeah,
And there will be many giveaways. There's going to be so much fun shit, like you won't want to miss it. So we'll have big announcement on that very
yeah,
soon.
and we're gonna have friends of the show who will be coming on. We'll be having previous guests of the show who will be coming on, and yeah, it's gonna be a really
People in our network.
yeah,
Yes.
and people, if you've listened to the show, people who you will be familiar with from this podcast and their own podcasts as well. So there's a lot of really fun stuff coming down the pipeline for that. I've sort of managed to narrow down some dates for us that we will obviously discuss and things like that. So all that information will be coming to you guys very, very shortly, and we'll be keeping you up to date. We'll be doing that not only during our episodes, but on our socials, which I'll just fire through quickly. X or Twitter at Damn Podcast, Facebook and Instagram Pod of the Damned. Email us at podofthedamned@gmail.com. Subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/Pod of the Damned. And if you want to subscribe to our Twitch, it's twitch.tv/pod_of_the_damned. So it's basically Pod of the Damned with each word separated by an underscore. And like I say, I will be going back to streaming some video games there as well. So we'll have some fun with that too.
I liked going in there. Like I can't remember what game you were playing, but you had forgotten to take that huge scream off there, and I played it, and you like flipped out. I like to go in there and harass you when you're gaming.
Oh, listen, like I'll openly admit, right? There are like, and this is not me being like saying this sort of thing to like be like, oh, big headed. Like there are no horror movies really out there that like scare me anymore. You know, because you know we're desensitized and things like
It
that.
is so hard. And when I found a movie that scares me, it's like I don't know, like like somebody just mainlined drugs into me or something, like where I'm like, wow, yeah. So Hereditary, I think, was the last movie that actually scared me.
However, I am an absolute wuss when it comes to playing horror video games. And if you watch me play video games, and Candy, you can attest to this, you will hear noises come out of my mouth that I didn't think was humanly possible to actually come out of my mouth. I am a big baby when it comes to horror video games. I will scream. I think I've cried. Yeah, you will have a fun time watching me play scary games. But I'm not just going to be playing scary games. I'll be playing some other games as well.
And I was a Twitch streamer probably more than a decade ago. And I played specifically just horror games. Right now I am kind of replaying State of Decay 2. So I'm happy to do this as well because gaming is a big passion of mine. I worked in video games for a long
Yeah,
time.
and you know what, horror and video games they can go hand in hand, and there's some absolutely incredible video game titles. There's games
And they
that
scare the shit out of me too. I get jump scared and I say the craziest shit that like people laugh so hard.
you know what, like there are video games that I've streamed previously because I on and off been streaming video games for probably about 8 years now. You know, I've taken sort of long breaks and we've rebranded and things happen and you know, but I got that itch again to sort of come back to it. And there's games that I've streamed before that I'll be streaming again. You know, I'll be playing through Resident Evil games again. I'll be playing through Silent Hill games again. I'm going to go through the Dead Space franchise. We're going to do whole load of really fun horror stuff, and like I say, we're gonna do some non-horror stuff as well because sometimes, you know what, I just want to fucking play Spyro the Dragon.
Yeah, you know what? That's fantastic. I mean, I'm a big Fallout fan. Fallout
Yeah.
76 can suck my actual dick, but everything else I love. I mean, and LA Noire is one of my top games of all time.
Yeah.
So, stuff like that.
Well,
So it's okay.
speaking of Fallout, I'm gonna do one of my classic. I'm gonna run off screen for 2 seconds because I bought a really cool thing the other day. So if you
Oh,
just bear
cool.
with me for 2 seconds. You see me rushing off in the background. So I actually bought a new item of clothing, and
Oh,
it's
okay.
it's possibly like my favorite thing of all time. So it's a hoodie, but it's my Vault 111 hoodie.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
I have one too.
yeah, and they're so fucking cool, and I absolutely love it, and I wear it everywhere now. And people look at me and think
I
I'm.
have now when E3 announced Fallout 4,
Mhm.
and they had that special edition. I mean, they later did another edition, but that first run of the limited where you get the steel book, the Pit Boy that works, put your phone in it. I have that.
Yeah, and also just to show you as well, because this is just proving how much I love Fallout. It's a poster that sits right next to my setup
Yeah, I
here
love it.
on the
And if
wall.
when you walk into my house, I have the Fallout 4 poster. I mean, the huge movie
Yeah,
size poster where it says "Welcome Home" and it
yeah.
has Vault Boy on it.
A fan of the TV show?
I haven't watched it yet.
Still not.
I'm not. It takes me a while because I have ADHD, but I tend to hyper focus. So right now, I've just been playing State of Decay 2,
Fair.
replaying that and playing it on harder and harder difficulty. So that's where my hyperfixation is at the moment. And then I put movies in there here and there, and I watch a lot of like Rick
I
Tracy,
have been sort of
Mystery
periodically
Investigator.
I have been periodically going back and playing Fallout 4 again, although it's been a couple of weeks, but you know.
Yeah, everybody's been kind of on a Fallout kick because of the show.
Yeah, and it's
So you know, my favorite is actually New Vegas.
yeah.
I'm a weirdo. I
Listen,
love Fallout New Vegas. And I'm
listen.
getting ready to go to Las Vegas again because I fucking love Las Vegas. So yeah, Viva Las Vegas, I guess.
Listen, my favorite is Fallout 3. But you know what? What I will say is to people, please also go and check out Fallout and Fallout 2, because those are
Yeah,
games that
they're
just
worth it.
they don't get the love they deserve. And even Fallout Tactics. But
Mm.
even Fallout Tactics, go give those games some love though, because they are worth it, and they do so much world building, and yeah, like please go check those games out.
And they're referenced, things from that are referenced throughout this
Yes.
series. So a lot of people came in at Fallout 3, but it's absolutely worth it to go back
Yeah, and
and
listen,
check these other things
I
out.
totally get why people did come in at Fallout 3, because obviously like Bethesda had taken over and it completely sort of rebooted the franchise.
It was
So
a beautiful looking game, blew me away. Like I got it on at launch, and I was like, "Oh my
I
God!"
remember that for
It was like orgasmic.
that first time I played Fallout 3, and just as you leave the vault and it just reveals the world, it's
I know
incredible.
that's what I'm talking about. It was like almost orgasmic. Like my hair stood on end. It was it's this barren wasteland, but it was so fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
It was just
I think like there's only really like one other game that's given me like a moment like that, and it's BioShock when you reveal Rapture.
yes.
Yeah, that's probably the only other video game that's given me that moment of here's a reveal of the world in which we're going to play this game, and it's beautiful and wonderful and incredible.
The funny thing is I play the trilogy at least once a year
Oh
of
yeah.
BioShock.
Um
BioShock is another of my favorite gaming franchises. It's scary. One, I have thalassophobia, and if you don't know what that is, listeners, that is fear of the ocean.
mhm.
So, especially the first two games where you're in Rapture, I mean, I am having almost panic attacks. But in a way that I love. I'm supposed to feel that
Yeah.
way. That I'm in the ocean and and everything's crazy there, and it's like my nightmares. It's scary as fuck. I People don't give that enough um you know recognition as horror games.
Yeah,
They're
oh,
horror.
100%. They are 100% horror games. If the BioShock franchise was actually one of the last franchises I did before I stopped streaming the last time. So, and I'll definitely play through them again at some point because they're just one of those franchises.
That LA Noir, those are like once a year.
Yeah, they are just franchises that, you know
Them.
what, once I've played like a lot of things and I'm struggling to think of something to play for, you know what, I'll just go and play BioShock again because they're fucking
I
great.
have to give myself a year so I can get re-immersed in it
And
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 just
and listen,
enjoy it.
BioShock has one of the great, well, an absolutely incredible twist in there as well. You know, I
Oh
remember
my God, when it happened, I was just like, what the fuck?
it absolutely blew my mind when I first played it. It was incredible.
Brilliant.
Okay, right. Just as I look at our timer, we finished actually the top five portion of this episode about an hour ago.
You guys
Um,
got some bonus
got some
content.
bonus content.
Thank
This is a two. This is now we've just ticked over into a 2 hour long episode. So I think this is probably a really great time to call things here for the night. Like I say,
Yes.
in our next episode, we will be reviewing The Exorcist. I'm going to be dropping a mini-sode at some point as well, talking about The Strangers Chapter 1, although you have my immediate thoughts on it. I'll get a little bit more in-depth in a mini-sode. Check out my mini-sode that I released for us last week as well, or, well, still this week at time of recording, but last week on Abigail. You can check that out. That's up there as well. And check out all of our previous, 111 episodes as well. That would be really incredible. If each single person goes out there and listens to, all 111 episodes, my download numbers will look hell so much better. It's only about, 250 hours worth of content. It's not too bad. But yeah, go check all those out. Candy, thank you very much once again for joining me and for doing this episode topic at kind of short notice.
It's always a good time, and I know you and I, we communicate so well that
I
I
genuinely
knew
don't.
you breeze.
I genuinely think we could do full episodes just without even a topic. To be honest, at
Oh,
this point,
yeah, yeah.
you got those podcasts out there that are just like, oh, two friends just sit and chat about like life and their trials and tribulations, and you're just like, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. I genuinely think we could do one of those.
Oh, 100%.
But yeah, thank you very much once again for joining me. Listeners, thank you very much once again for downloading and listening to this episode. As always, we really appreciate every single one of you who talks to us, who downloads us, who follows us. We thank you very, very much. And until next week on Pod of the Damned, just remember, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.